Hi everyone, my name is David Ellis and welcome to Quantum Listener. Today we're going to talk about an interesting thing that happened recently in Cleveland. Cleveland Orchestra did a wonderful performance of Haydn's Seasons. I was unfortunately unable to attend. But they ran into an interesting dilemma. They had two soloists for the Seasons and they both got sick. It was extremely short notice. They had to come up with a solution that did not involve substitutes. That's why it was such a very interesting situation. They had to decide whether we put on the concert with the incomplete seasons, which is what they ended up doing, or they could have canceled it, and they decided to keep calm and carry on. They were able to do all the pieces without the two missing soloists. But it reminded me of all the various stories that I've had as a performer, and I'm sure many of you who might be watching are familiar with these as well. When performances go wrong, this has happened a whole variety of times, things ranging from broken strings, fallen bridges, various instrumental malfunctions. I want to talk just about how often that actually happens, and you might not be aware of it. Say, for instance, and this happens somewhat frequently, not that frequently, but it does happen. You'll have a violin soloist, they're playing a concerto, and their strings break. There's a whole choreography that happens where the soloist takes their instrument, they hand it to the concertmaster, and the concertmaster, they hand it all the way back, restring it, and then they hand it back up through the line. It's usually very well thought out, there's etiquette involved. Other issues that come along are sometimes not as expected. The example that comes to mind, the violist Yuri Bashmet had a very famous video some years ago, and his tailpiece fell off, which it's one thing if a string breaks, but think about this for a moment. So with a cello anyway, you've got 50 pounds of pressure per string. Maybe it's 50 pounds pressure total. To look all this up. Point being is that there's an enormous amount of pressure on that bridge. So when all that pressure goes, it's pretty much pyrotechnic, and that's what happened with Yuri Bashmet. It all went in an instant, and it just flew off, and it was quite spectacular to see. I guess this has happened to me a lot now that I think of it, actually. For those who know me since high school will know this story for sure. I belonged in an orchestra, a wonderful orchestra in Ohio called Contemporary Youth Orchestra. We would do one concert a year, and they still do this, one concert a year, which they bring in a rock artist. And that year was Styx. I was principal cello. It was very exciting, and everyone got very caught up, and there were times where people stood up to dance, which is all well and good if your instrument does not lie on the ground, like mine did. It got kicked over and it got a crack beneath the bridge of such a nature that we are happy it was as minor as it was, but you don't want to play very loudly on instrument with that kind of a crack. 3 pieces later, I would be doing a giant solo. A very fun thing, but very interesting when you're playing on someone else's instrument, especially when you're in high school. There was a time I was in Ecuador. The night before a concert, I had a wonderful dish of, I don't know what it was. As one allergic to nuts, you really want to check and see if there's pesto in a dish first. If there's anything that I learned from all these experiences, I'm actually very happy that I had so many of these very crazy experiences. Anything can happen. You learn to adapt. Don't think about how in tune every note should be. It should really be about what kind of soul you can bring to a piece, what kind of spirit you can bring to a piece. Standing ovation for all their effort, and boy is it a lot of effort to do something like that. You think you're going to play this, but nope, you're going to change everything last minute. It reminds me of a wonderful quote by the British comedian David Mitchell. He talks about how comedy is what happens when things screw up. He doesn't say screw, he says a different word. The idea that that's what makes it funny. The sort of veneer of a performance starts to come off. much more exciting for the audience. The players certainly, yes, but not necessarily in a negative way. I hope that this is a suitable introduction into the kinds of things we'll talk about on this channel. We'll talk about pieces that I think are underrated and the circumstances which lead to them not being performed as often. We'll be doing these videos weekly. Probably every Wednesday I'll be uploading something. Occasionally I'll put some links in the description down below. The orchestra that I conduct, Earth and Air, I've put that link down below. Without further ado, I'll see you on Wednesday.